Today on CityCast Chicago, this is the season for giving back. And one thing you probably heard a lot in the past few years is to get involved in local mutual aid. But where can you find mutual aid networks in the city? And what is mutual aid anyway? We're talking with someone who works on one of these networks to bring you everything you need to know. It's Monday, November 25th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Myra Quadra is a writer, reporter, and the co-founder of Market Box Chicago, a mutual aid effort based in Woodlawn that works to get fresh food to people who need it. Myra, welcome back to CityCast Chicago.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Always great to have you here, my friend. Let's start with the very, very basics. What is mutual aid?
Thank you for asking. So mutual aid is basically the practice of people, community, neighbors getting together to try to address some sort of survival need that's happening. And so this can take the form of like childcare being too expensive. So then you have childcare co-ops. It takes the form of food insecurity. And so neighbors get together to source food or buy food together and distribute it more equitably. That is different from just charity, which is this notion that okay, rich people, which is also like a necessary thing. And this idea that, okay, rich people, you need to donate to this thing and someone else will take care of it. And you're not actually building any community from that act of charity necessarily.
I feel like during this time when people say donate, right, give back, it's so open-ended. They could be talking about like a nonprofit, a charity organization. They could be talking about maybe someone in the community who has a local need or a local GoFundMe, or they could be talking about a mutual aid network. Can you say a little bit more about like how this word community really differentiates mutual aid networks maybe from some of these other forms of donation or like charity-based organizations?
There aren't like hard and fast rules about it, but the way that I think about it is if you know of including financial need within a community, right? It could be a neighbor that's struggling to buy groceries or a friend that is struggling to pay rent and experiencing housing instability. That call to directly give money to address the need. So Venmoing or Cash Apping that said friend who's experiencing a medical emergency. Or maybe you don't have money to give, but you're like, hey, I can, help you move your stuff out of your place into this next place you're going. Hey, you can crash on my couch this week. All of those people, including the people that gave money, are like sharing some level of contribution to this need. It is not only a financial option. And so something we often say in Market Box, which does depend also on donations, so that we can buy the food, we can buy the fresh produce from farmers, local grocery stores. Our biggest need is always drivers, right? And so from the people who are packing to the people who are texting and calling to make sure, oh, are you home to pick up this delivery? There's so many different roles, and all of those people within that shared volunteer effort are all considered a part of the mutual aid effort, including the people that donate, but also definitely including the people that are driving and packing, the children that are there to making this space more fun. Like one of the things that's tough about the charity difference is it connecting you any more deeply into making this community stronger through relationships? So when in doubt, being like, am I building relationships within a community by participating in this, by donating, by showing up? If you are not, then that's probably charity. And but I'm sure it could help meet a need. But if you are growing relationships.
Right. Have you made a new friend doing this work? Have you seen the direct relationship between your giving, your efforts, whether it's time, resources, money, and someone on the other end receiving that assistance, receiving that help in some respects?
Yeah. Did you meet new neighbors through this process?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, then that is a good sign that it is actually mutual aid and a community network.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how MarketBox came together?
We got started in April 2020. Um, Basically, at that time, if folks can remember those times.
We were a month into a global shutdown.
Yes. And so one of the many things that was a disruption in people's lives was that farmers markets shut down. And with that meant that the people who were using their link cards, which basically allows you to use like EBT at food at farmers markets, that program was no longer functional because the people couldn't then use that towards like a grocery store. You couldn't shop online with it. And so myself and like four other people, Hannah Neihart from Build Coffee, um, Bridget, Wendy, J. Michael from the Experimental Station, the folks at the Southside Weekly, myself, and some others at the Invisible Institute, we all are in the same building. And there's a farmer's market that would happen outside on Saturdays. And so we were like, all right, what if we basically do a CSA, which basically is like you gather produce from various farmers or from a farm, and it gets delivered to you. What if we do a CSA for these folks and so our goal was like 40 families in Woodlawn. And it just felt like something we'd be able to do together and brings the community together in a dark time. And then the need for that like exploded. Basically, once the protests began, especially after George Floyd was killed, grocery stores shut down because there was like fear of like looting, et cetera. And so now the need for food and CPS stopped briefly. They stopped their pick up your free lunch program that they were also running at the time. So suddenly it was like hundreds upon hundreds of people were like, where are we getting our food from?
On top of the fact that for people who might have been able to just go to a grocery store, they would run in and see shelves emptied, right? People had, hoarded toilet paper and things like that. So it's like a number of different factors all leading to so many going without.
Absolutely. And within this pipeline of food, local farmers were also struggling because one of their main sources of income of like being able to go to these farmers markets and sell their produce, they weren't able to do that either because the farmers markets were canceled. So we were like, all right, we're seeing need across like a wide spectrum here. And so we thought, all right, what if we gather funds to purchase produce from these vendors that we know, make this list, pack it and deliver it to as many families as we can. And again, our goal originally was 40. The list ballooned to like 400, over 400 people. Over that summer, we collaborated with other mutual aid groups, including like the People's Grab and Go, that every Monday they were outside of an elementary school, especially when CPS had stopped that program, doing grocery giveaways. And so that's how we got started. And then we've sort of been able to stabilize, and like a huge blessing has been the ability of dozens of volunteers to create a system of routine packing and delivery days that involve a phone call check-in with people who are receiving MarketBox every week, like the week before that they get delivered, to do those check-ins, to be like, are you good? That was also a thing during 2020, was like people were doing more of these phone banks to be like, do you need anything? Are you okay? So that has maintained. And now we deliver to roughly 450 people, 450 households.
Wow.
Every month for the past 4.5 years.
When I've asked individuals maybe their hesitance to donating, they wonder, will their money actually go to the cause that the organization talks about? Or will it go to like pay salaries and for PR? Inside of something like MarketBox or in the mutual aid networks that you're familiar with, do those same problems exist?
So I think whether it's nonprofit or not, budget transparency is like just a very, very important thing. So the vast majority, I don't know the exact percentage amount, but like by a large majority, our costs, our food is literally buying the food, because all of our drivers are volunteers. We do give people like $10 gas stipends if they want them. Gas has gotten crazy expensive. All the packers are volunteers. All the people who do like dispatch, which is basically making the routes, that's all volunteer. And I do think people are maybe more primed and willing to give to something where they know that, oh, my money is almost entirely going towards literally buying groceries for somebody.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I would say that what I've learned through this experience is we've tried some different formats. There was a time where we had like a few part-time employees just to make sure that it keeps going because it's actually a lot of work. It's a lot of volunteer labor. And so sometimes we've been all volunteers, sometimes we've had a couple of employees. But all that to say is like, I think what is really satisfying about contributing to mutual aid, either with your time or your money or effort or whatever, is you are closer and as close as possible to the issue and to the people who are most affected by what you're talking about and trying to solve together, the need you're trying to meet together.
What are some other examples of mutual aid projects in and around Chicago?
So one of my favorites is Chicago Community Jail Support, which also got started in 2020. A lot of folks have noticed that when people are released from Cook County Jail, often in the middle of the night or the wee hours of the morning, they are, often without a lot of the belongings they came with because they were
Mhm.
first taken to a police station before they were transferred to the jail. And when you're at the police station, you lose your coat, you lose your outer layers, you lose your shoelaces, you lose your wallet, you lose your phone, you lose your belt. Like, how are you supposed to get home? What are we doing here? And that is a need that the government could solve. And so this group of volunteers was like, okay, we are going to have a tent and a table, and we're going to have venture cards, and we're going to have just a place where people can make a phone call.
We'll have some
We'll
coats.
We'll have some coats. We'll have like some snacks. We'll have some
Mhm.
hand warmers, especially in the winter. Imagine getting out in the middle of winter in Chicago. And so the offerings have evolved in certain ways, but again, that is all volunteer shifts. That is all contributions of community. You just feel closer to parts of the city that you otherwise can isolate yourself from. You can think, okay, Cook County Jail's over there. I'm not affected by it. But the truth is, you are. If somebody is wandering around cold and scared and not sure how to get home, they are less safe. And then by extension, we are all less safe if that becomes a systemic pattern. Some others I'd point to, I know Edgewater Mutual Aid has also been has sustained from 2020. It's very hard to sustain for that long. Rogers Park has a free store. I think free stores are super cool and interesting. There's some like Facebook groups I know also that have been trying to mobilize resources or basically just share resources for like recent arrivals, like recent immigrants, to be like, I have this furniture I don't need. I have these coats I don't need. And so it's not always giving money. It could be literally just like giving away your stuff or just like, okay, who needs this thing? So yeah, are there others that like have come up for y'all when you've like been thinking about mutual aid?
Yeah. As we've been saying throughout the conversation, there are a few lists across the Chicagoland area, and you can find them really centralized in neighborhoods across the city. I'm thinking about things like Farm Food and Families, which serves families in Little Village, Inglewood, and South Chicago. The Pilsen Solidarity Network. You mentioned the Rogers Park Free Store. There's also Food Not Bombs up in Rogers Park. Femme Defensa, which is a mutual aid network for femme liberation and survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence across the city. Interestingly enough, I know that like even as we talk through this conversation, the very aspect of mutual aid has been around for generations and generations. And yet since 2016, then again in 2020, and even now in 2024, coincidentally around Trump Part 1 pandemic and Trump Part 2, there have been these growing calls for people to like get involved in your community, get involved with a mutual aid network. Why do you think like mutual aid is the word that is coming up so much during these moments?
Well, I think mutual aid is the first thing that people often point to because I think, again, I do think it's an entryway into having a better analysis of what's causing the issue at hand that you're trying to meet. And then, two, ideally, if done well, it's like connected in some wider way to an organizing effort. Like, I work a lot with a group called Southside Together that has a mutual aid program at Parkside Elementary. And that mutual aid program has also been sustained for 5 years. Very small, but like it's a way of meeting other students there. It's a way of meeting parents. It's a way of meeting staff. And so it's a community building function as well. And I think in these moments, 2016, 2020, 2024, of course, there are moments with a lot of panic and crisis and survival needs like flare up and emerge. And so I think in any moment like that, a good instinct is to be like, okay, take your feelings of panic and anxiety and think about how can that energy be redirected to actually addressing something. Like, also, don't do it alone. Like, don't have that spiral by yourself. There are other people that feel the way that you feel, and you will feel stronger and more assured if you are doing something with other people that share your frustrations. And so mutual aid is a great way to meet other people, build ideally hyper locally within your community. Like if there's an effort within your neighborhood, like knowing the people in your building, oh my goodness, getting to know your neighbors quite literally, whether it's like giving them cookies or like meeting them, inviting them over, because that sets the basis for being able to mobilize and activate and organize when an actual crisis hits you locally. I think people point to mutual aid because one, it's addressing a survival need. And we are always talking about it in moments of crisis. And it feels like these crises are constant. And then two, it's a good way to meet people and begin to take the initial step towards building power.
Do you have any advice for someone who listens and wants to start maybe giving their time or developing their own mutual aid effort?
Well, I'd share two pieces of advice. One is if there is something in your neighborhood or within the network of people that you know, and I would also say, like, even if you don't think there is, like, just do a little more asking, like direct asking of the people that you do know. People call it pod mapping, but like mapping out the people you interact with in a given week or a given month and ask those people, is there something they're involved with? You might not know. They might not put it on social media. And start with if there are things there already, so that one, like maybe it's actually a great fit, but two, you'll learn something that can inform the way you redirect or pivot your time and energy. And then if you decide to get together with folks within that pod to address a need within and around that pod of people, I would advise people to think of a couple of things. One is, how can you make sure you are not recreating an existing problematic structure in the way that you set something up? And by that, I will give a very specific example. When the People's Grab and Go and Market Box got started, something we realized was a barrier to receiving food for a lot of people was that, like, the food bank at the time required an ID, a government ID. And also they had a rule of like one bag per ID. Because our initial thought was like, oh, what if we can pick up bags for people from the food bank and deliver it to our neighbors who are disabled or can't get out of the house or whatever. And we were like, oh, we can't do that. Where apparently we can't do that because there's these barriers to entry. And then secondly, we realized that when people try to get assistance from the government, there are so many hoops they have to jump through, specifically like proving their need, explaining themselves. If the real goal here is to build a stronger community, how can you try to build something that is genuinely rooted in trust, where people can self-identify what they can offer and what they need, and then believe people?
We don't want people to overwhelm themselves from getting involved, from starting initiatives. But if you move too quickly, too hastily from, oh, I have an idea to help people, to trying to implement, like you said, you could be one, recreating terrible power structures. Two, you could be setting yourself up for something that's unsustainable. Or three, you might enter into a situation in which, again, if you have no background in managing money, managing donations, managing people, like you said, being communal when, providing and giving resources to people, then these are some of the things you should like dip your toe in, learn from others, listen before you speak, show up to a few meetings, right? Be a volunteer first before just trying to be a leader. I think these are really some good tips for people to think about.
Yeah, thank you. And I would also just add to people, like, I think the scale thing, trying to scale it up, like resist that urge initially. Like really try to get to know people and strengthen a genuine community, which takes time and work. And remember that it doesn't always have to be money related per se. Like the process of trying to help someone apply on someone undocumented, a recent immigrant who is trying to get their paperwork together. There's lots of opportunities to just provide that type of application support, or like, there is no shortage of need for homework help. Or if you know Spanish, can you teach people Spanish so that we can have more volunteers? So try to really take stock of the skills you have beyond like money that you can contribute.
Mayra Kwadwo is a writer, reporter, and the co-founder of Market Box Chicago. We will drop all of the links we talked about in our show notes. Mayra, thank you for making time today.
Thank you so much, Kobe. Appreciate you.
Before we get out of here, make sure you bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you can catch up on old podcast episodes, subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, check out our neighborhood and walking guides, our best food and drink list, and so much more. Of course, I can't let you go without some good news. This Wednesday is Skate Jam 2024. Skate Jam against gun violence at the rink in Avalon Park is getting put on from 10:30 to 1:30 a.m. and my family throwing the party, so we're going to be in the building. Ticket links is in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you for listening and reading. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.